What's up, everyone? I'm James Baney, and I'm here with Kyle Larson, and we are getting ready to do a spoiler-filled book discussion on Thrawn Ascendancy, Chaos Rising. Stick around. All right, Kyle, we are back yet again to talk about probably one of our most dense discussions. This book is just full of hefty content, and a lot of it comes in the form of names and places and just basically proper nouns, if you will, but yet still such like a gentle read. It's just a lot to read, but a nice breeze through, so long as you can get through all the proper nouns, right?
I have to say, I was super intimidated the first couple of pages, but like you just keep going and you just get it. You know, it all clicks.
Yeah.
So it's
not a bad book. I think I'll give like a quick overview of what book we're actually talking about here, and then we'll get into our ratings on the book and our review. This week, I'm so used to the regular podcast. This particular episode, we're going to be talking about Thrawn Ascendancy, Chaos Rising. It's the first of 3 novels coming that we know of. But this particular one was released September 1st, 2020. It's written by, of course, Timothy Zahn, famous Thrawn writer, and read by Mark Thompson. This book was published by Del Rey and Random House Audio. Thanks for sending us the promo copies and stuff.
Yes, thank you very much.
And the timeline for this book is roughly the Clone Wars era. And to be totally true about this, I don't think we would really know it if it weren't for a certain segment of the book that kind of overlaps with other Thrawn stories that we've seen before. I'm not getting into spoilers right now. Let's do our rating and review. For me personally, I think I'm giving this a 7.8. And as I'm looking at where it fits in my thing, the book that I put just right above it is that original Thrawn. But I do think it's better than Alliances and the last one.
Treason.
Treason, that's right.
I thought you were going to do like a dramatic delivery, but
no.
Treason.
I just couldn't think of the name. I do think it's better than those for, a handful of reasons. But I think the biggest reason I did, in fact, enjoy this book was because of the world building involved. And I know I'm probably going to say that a lot in this discussion. But I think the way that this book starts off is so like Silmarillion Tolkien based. It's like the 9 families, I will name them. It's almost biblical. You know what I mean? It's like reading like,
there's a
like the book of Numbers, whole, like right in there's like there was this man, and then after that he begat to this man, and then after that he begat this man, They
could have had an appendices in this book. It would have been great,
Yes. But yeah, just the way that they get into how the Chiss society works is so cool. And it's very clear in my mind that even though those things have never been talked about in Thrawn's other trilogy or anything else he's ever done, like in Star Wars Rebels or anything like that, this has been something that he's been working on mentally as like the backstory to Thrawn. Like, it's almost kind of like George Lucas himself. Like he writes 4, 5, and 6, but he knows in the back of his head, Darth Vader was this boy, and he was a pupil of Obi-Wan Kenobi, and like he had all this stuff planned out, and it's just now that he's able to get into more of the details of this entirely new civilization and culture that's happening over there in the unknown regions, and how they live their lives day to day and just completely apart from Star Wars, which is happening over there, but yet we're looking over the whole thing and saying all of it's Star Wars. It's kind of crazy. But 7.8 for me, just under the original Thrawn. And I think the only reason that holds up is that little tweak of nostalgia of like, hey man, this was our introduction to the character in the new canon for me, because I never read the Heir to the Empire stuff. I was like, I've heard a lot about this guy. They're introducing him. This is my first introduction. This is Thrawn. I love that story. And it's also got the comic adaptation. So I really like have kind of ingrained the characters and stuff into my head.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on this book? What did you rate it?
So I've been like kind of between an 8.5 and a 9. So I guess I could say like an 8.75. I usually don't go that accurate. And it actually is my favorite Thrawn book. I've enjoyed them all, and I read the Heir to the Empire ones, a long time ago. But I totally agree I think you make a great point by saying like this felt like I was reading the story Timothy Zahn's had in his head for the last 30 years, or maybe not 30 years, like 20 years since he started writing these books. Because like when you hear him talk about Thrawn, and
it'd be closer to 30 years, because he didn't start writing these in 2000.
Yeah,
it was closer to like 90s.
Right. So it would be like mid 90s, and or early 90s even. And I think 93 was when the first one came out. I remember reading it when I was like, I was like 12 or something when I read it. So, and it had been out for a while. I think I read it right after the last of the Dark Rising trilogy, or Heir to the Empire trilogy. The Dark Rising, I think, is the last book.
And let me jump in really quick. Are you saying that this is even better than the Legends Thrawn books? In your opinion,
I don't know,
or are you just sticking to the canon?
In my opinion, but also I should qualify that is 12, 13-year-old Kyle's opinion, and I haven't read those books since then. But this book grabbed me, or I was much more engrossing to me than the other books. Even though I did enjoy them, I don't think that any of them are bad. But this one is just really stands out, because this one, those other ones, and this is dense as well, and those other ones are dense, but this one just flows, and you just feel like he had these notebooks in a box in his office somewhere that he would take out, to reference things maybe when he was doing any Thrawn novels. And then all of a sudden they're like, why don't you just write a book with those notebooks, and he was able to like establish every single thing. So now he doesn't really have to hold your hand anymore when he's talking about things related to the Chiss. He can just tell this story, and he's setting it up. And one thing I do remember hearing him say when I saw him speak is the way that he's approached this character, because there's now this new canon and these legends, is he would like, someday if for some reason those stories ever became canon, he wants them to fit seamlessly. So he doesn't distinguish between legends and canon for him. So he has such a love for this character and this character's story, and that to me just came through in all of the writing. And so it was just such a pleasure to read for me, where and really stood apart. So I loved it, and it feels like Star Wars, even though there's not, some of the staple Star Wars things that are in there. It still felt like Star Wars to me. So I'm all for it, and I think people are gonna love it. I hope they really come to it with an open mind, because I think a lot of fans are really gonna enjoy this.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. You were saying how it was like an easy read, but in a way, like this review is kind of odd for us, because I'm trying to explain how crazy difficult it is to follow who's in the room and what's going on, but yet still tell you that the story itself just flows really easily. And the best example that I've come up with it when trying to think, how am I going to explain this, is it would be like taking a very dense world building novel like Lord of the Rings, for instance, right? And then just turning it into a YA novel. So like take the adult novelization out of it and write that story as a YA novel, like kind of dumb it down. But then you're obviously still going to have all these really complex names, because those aren't going to change. You're still going to have Gandalf the Grey, and you're going to have to remember that who's talking in the room, and you're going to have to know later in the movie that, or in the book, that character dies and then he becomes Gandalf the White, and how that's different is this weird mythology of how he's not really a wizard like we think of wizards. Wizards are more like angels in this world, and you gotta like piece all that stuff together.
No, the theme of transformation is all over the place in this book.
Yeah, but it at the same time, like, if you don't want all the complexities of Lord of the Rings, here's the YA version. And it reads really easy. The story comes together fairly well. The only thing is just trying to learn all the different species and names and how their naming system and government and hierarchy all works. But like, I can tell you this, once you get through the book, you come back to other chapters and you're like, oh, all of this makes sense now. Yeah. It just reads so easy. Like, this is a book that I think you might have struggled with your first time through, but I think you'll get it. But if you were to read it a second time, every bit of it would be like, oh, I totally know Thalius, and I know how she's in the myth. Okay, yeah, because I remember she's all right. I got all this stuff figured out. Do you want to get into spoilers? Let's go ahead and talk about like the bigger the details of the book and stuff. Yeah. I don't know where to start, man. I mean,
we could talk about some favorite scenes, or
forget scene. Like, what's your favorite thing about this book? Well, why did you like it? Why'd you give it such a high score?
Well, I liked it because, you know, and I mentioned this in the intro, was that, you know, the staples aren't there. So like, usually and I think one of the reasons why, you know, our discussion about this isn't as fluid with others is like, we don't have things like, you know, we say the Jedi and people know who the Jedi are, the Republic, people know who the Republic are. But if we say like the Chiss or the Garians, or, you know, the
Nicardoon,
like, you know, like
the Myth family versus
I'm still messing up. Yeah. And, you know, people are going to be kind of like, what, you know? So, but my favorite thing is like how eventually those click when you start reading, and then when they do click, you're like, oh, that makes total sense. And like, things are kind of choppy in the beginning, but if you just kind of like latch on to like the people that you know, I like how that will really help you guide you through the story, because, you know, there's Thrawn and then there's Ar'alani, and those two characters, if you kind of look at them and focus on them in crucial scenes, then all the characters kind of come around them, because so many important things happen around both of those characters. And then the way that Zahn, sometimes this really irritates me with authors, but the way that he did it, I thought was really well with the memories chapters, where they're very distinct between each chapter.
Night and day from Alliances. Yeah, totally. I'll tell you that.
Totally.
Alliances to me was just so all over the place. I would start chapters and I'd be like, I don't know where I am. I don't know who's talking. I don't know what time era I'm in. And this book, like, literally just labeling every chapter, every beginning with like Memories 1 chapter, and then chapter 1, and then chapter 2, and then Memories 2. It's like, okay, I immediately know, just going into it, exactly where I'm picking up. I'm picking up where we left off from Memories 1. You know? Yeah. It's very, I know it sounds like it's kind of skipping around, but at the same time, it's just like you're reading two books at the same time. And
I was just going to say,
they tie in with each other so well
at the same time.
And somehow they kind of just tell you. Actually, I'll give you a really good example. Thrawn Alliances, to me, like, it was like watching the Clone Wars in release order. And this book was like watching the Clone Wars in chronological order. Somehow or another, you're able to navigate the timeline, like season 3, episodes 1, 2, and 3, but then go back to season 1 and watch episodes 5, 6, and 7, you know, but it makes so much more sense when you do it that way. This book does a really good job at letting you know where you're at when it's the memories and when it's the chapters. Yeah.
Yeah. When I went back to do notes over the last couple of days, as you had suggested, I went chronologically, going by the memories, and it is two you could have two very distinct books,
Mm-hmm.
but like you said, the way that they're stacked together is perfect. And they really do contextualize a lot of things. They don't necessarily set up the next chapter, but they do give you context into why certain people are doing the things that they do. Because there's so much palace intrigue in this book that if those memories chapters weren't in there, you'd be like, I mean, you couldn't really do justice to the dynamics with like a 1 or 2 paragraph, like, oh, this is why this character doesn't like Thrawn, or this is why this character thinks this.
Yeah, or anytime they start to allude to that, then they just jump back in the memories and they kind of like explain that. And I really like, and I know we said this in our like what happened in the book kind of thing, but like there is this really cool dynamic there that's like even if you would never describe the book as this, in a way you could almost describe the main storyline as him receiving the Springhawk back and proceeding to be a good captain of that ship, leader on that ship, whereas the memories was him receiving the Springhawk for the first time and failing the ship, and we just kind of like learn those stories back and forth. By the time we get to the end of the book and Thrawn's about to like become a great leader of the Springhawk again, we're starting to get to the sections of his memories where it's like, you messed up, man. We're taking that away from you. You know, it's just kind of interesting.
Yeah.
I personally, for me though, I do think my favorite thing about this book probably is Admiral Ar'alani. And how she is so inherently connected to him, like a best friend from elementary school or something.
Yes.
Me and you both missed that the character... This is another one of those like weird details. Like, before I even get into that, I thought for the longest time there was a character in this book called Syndic. And it's because of weird little things like people will walk into a room and they're like, Syndic, why are you here? And I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
This character's name is Syndic. That makes sense. It sounds very Chiss. And it took me a long time to realize that that was just a shorthand name for like governor. Why are you here? Syndic is syndicate of a certain family. And so now, like I said, when you go back to the beginning of the book and you're reading through and they're like, oh, a syndic, or he's a syndicate of this family or whatever, it all pieces together. You just have to kind of put it together. What I was going to say about Ar'alani, though, is that for a large portion of the memory section, she's a character named Ziara. And I'm like, I don't know Ziara. That's a new character. Thrawn seems to have a pretty close relationship to it. Maybe it was an old girlfriend or something like that, because they kind of go on some dates and stuff. And it's interesting because then as you learn more about this book and the way that the Chiss like have their names and everything, you realize, okay, she's part of the Arisi family, the Arisi Z, and then her name is Ar'alani, so you get the Ziara Lonnie, you get the Ziara in there just the same way as you get Mitth'raw'nuruodo, you know, and you get the Thrawn that's in there. She had the name Ziara because she was part of the Arisi family and that was her name. And then later she changes her name from Ziara to Admiral Ar'alani because she doesn't have a family anymore. So Ar'alani is just her name, you know. It's like, and that's not even something about the character. That's a little bit of like, I enjoyed learning that and understanding that through that character. Like, you learn it with Thrawn pretty in the beginning too, because they call him just like Nurodo, right? Like at the very beginning, Cadet Nurodo like and stuff like that. So it's like, okay. And then you kind of like learn, or Ran'nuruodo or whatever. Yeah, I don't know. It's a little bit confusing, but I enjoyed Admiral Ar'alani. I enjoy the relationship. It kind of, in a way, reminds me of his relationship with shoot, now I'm gonna blank on his name, but the main character in the original Thrawn, Eli Vanto. Yeah. That book ends with him being like, what is a friend? You have your allies, you have your enemies, but what is a friend? And he kind of like builds this relationship with Eli, and then is that his name, Eli?
Yeah, it's Eli Vanto. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Just for some reason it sounds weird. But he makes a friend with him, and then he recruits him into the Chiss Ascendancy, and he sends him to go meet up with this character Admiral Ar'alani. And it's like, she welcomes him and she's like, all right, you're the guy. All right, I'm here to meet you. Welcome to the Chiss Ascendancy. You're part of us now.
Yep.
And it's so crazy now to learn so much more about them and how they're connected. And I'm excited for books 2 and 3 because she's there. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah.
Not even so much to hear about, this unknown entity at the end of the book who's Yiv the Benevolent's boss and stuff. It's very like
it's cool, but like
Marvel.
I'm like, all right, like, that'll be interesting. Yeah, it is very Marvel.
Don't mess with them. They're not to be tried with or whatever. And he's like, I'll do it myself. He's got the gauntlet and stuff.
Yeah,
it ready. Feels like that's kind of how this book is ending. It's leading up to like a bigger enemy. And that's cool. I'm pumped on it. But it definitely does just kind of feel like, I don't know, like Captain America fighting Red Skull in this book. You're like, yeah, he's an enemy, but
it's not much of a villain in this book.
Well, it's like
he's fighting by like proxies too. He's not really even doing that much fighting against Thrawn.
Yeah,
he's just kind of like throwing rocks at him. It feels
it's
like
weird
a lot of
because as much as we say like that is the story, is him like solving the mystery of who this person is and how to take him down. At the same time, I feel like the core and the heart of the book is Thrawn learning to be who he is inside of the world of the Chiss. And it's like, take a step back. It's just like us looking at their world and learning more about it.
I totally agree. I mean, there's like with the way that they use the names, like the theme of transformation is all over this book. Especially because we're seeing them as young people, and I'm talking like Thrawn and Ar'alani, and you're seeing them grow. Like that chapter, one of my favorite chapters was when Ar'alani, like when she had to kind of be like a caretaker for the Skywalker, because they're children at that point with their third sight is what they call it, but it's we know it's kind of like a force ability for them, but it's very taxing on the Chiss physiology for some reason, and so they just have these caretakers. And Thalius is away with Thrawn. Ar'alani is like, all right, I'll do it, and you kind of get these like nice quieter moments with her too, and you see that like she sees that these are human, or well, not human, they're Chiss, but she sees that there's humanity there and that there's a soul, and that they have to be nurtured and cared for, because most of the Skywalker kids, they talk about how they're usually disregarded and like they can't show signs of fatigue or distress. So there's just so much wonderful character work in this book, and the way that they grow, especially Thrawn and Ar'alani.
It's interesting too, because you can look at those as the main characters of this book, but it's actually quite interesting how much of the story is devoted to Thalius and Cheery as well. Just trying to dive into this person who was once a Skywalker and didn't have a lot of hope, met Thrawn one time and was like, self-proclaimed. Yes. This is a line from the book. You guys have read it. You gave me hope. And so she's so interested in Thrawn that she's somehow drawn back to him, and how being around him so massively changes her life, and how she also like affects and therefore caretakes the character Cheery, who is also, and this is a little bit of those like that cool canon, how everything connects thing. I got my mind blown when he's like, oh, you should come with me to Cheery, to this outside thing.
Yeah.
And then he's like talking to Anakin Skywalker, and he's like, "It's just me and my pilot," which is this scene from Alliances and I remember that scene happening, blew my mind. I'm like, now I know who the pilot is now. This is so crazy how this is coming together.
Yeah.
Like, it's just so cool
really
because
cool.
I remember the scene being like, you didn't tell me about your droid, I didn't feel like it was important for me to mention who my pilot was, and you never learn really anything about it at the time, but now to realize that there's so much more to that character who was just named the pilot in that book.
Yeah.
And now I know a lot about this character and how she's a Skywalker. I know like her fears and, all this other stuff.
Yeah.
And again, it's just like another one of those world building type things where it's like the Chiss don't need to use these navigators that are the people who are just aware of like the paths. Like, I don't know, it's like getting like a cab driver, whereas like in like the main like regular galaxy, everybody's just using GPS.
Yeah.
But like in this galaxy, they don't have GPS, so they just use taxi cab drivers to take them to the places that they need to go. But it's weird because the Chiss,
that's a good way to say it.
Interestingly enough, they're just kind of like hoping for the best, and they use these young Chiss with this force ability to help them get through these areas where they don't have to have any allegiance to these pathfinders or navigators, if you will. And that's kind of, I mean, you guys know we're talking spoilers, you've read the book, but that's kind of interesting how it unfolds. The one time where they kind of do need to use the navigators for whatever reason, they kind of start to begin to open up the crime and the like corruption in this crew. You know what I mean? They're very well aware that there's these people and they're kind of just taking over civilization. They're okay with it. That particular character's like helping them out,
Yeah, they're supposed to be impartial, but this character, Keylori, is not at all. You find out he doesn't really like, he's fascinated by Thrawn, impressed by him, but he doesn't really like him. And he's kind of working for Yves the Benevolent and kind of setting Thrawn up in a way throughout the book.
I kind of got the impression too that it was more than just him. Like it was kind of like,
no, there's more of them. Yeah.
I don't know how to I don't know how to say it, but like, like, hey, it's not just this one shady group who works for this company. Like a lot of people who work for that company are pulling back end deals and, I'm sure doing this stuff to kind and letting people know, what's going on and leaking information and stuff like that. It's kind of like, it's like the concept of like a dirty cop or something like that, right?
Yeah.
There's like corruption
totally.
in the system or something. So, but that's the Pathfinders, and this character Keylori is obviously going to be carried over into the next one. I don't know how excited I am about that. I think they're just they were utilizing him as a way to kind of explain the mastermind villain. But it does. I wasn't like a huge fan of that character.
No, I didn't. I mean, he served his purpose, and he just kind of established that like there is these group of people that exist.
He was very stoogey, in my opinion.
Yeah.
He was just kind of going along with whatever. At least, I felt like he always handled himself pretty well. Like anytime anybody was like, "What do you think?" he'd be like, "Oh, I know what I'm not supposed to say." So he would give a good answer back. But I always felt like he was like just kind of a low level pawn, that was being utilized.
He totally was.
I could see that character being killed, and I would have been like, "Oh, cool, okay." He wasn't a very good guy. Ended up paying the price, but it seems like he's now. I'm trying to think of an example from like a TV show or something like that, where like
he's He's like
I'm trying to think of like the Power Rangers or something like that. Like when Rita Repulsa's defeated, then Goldar and all the other little like pawn characters, they just go work for Lord Zed. Like, why do those characters move over? I feel like those characters should be killed off, and then Rita should now be under Zed, and keep the Rita character. But instead they killed off Yiv the Benevolent, and they brought his stooge to now be the stooge of the other. But I don't know.
Well, it's almost like the purpose that he serves in the end is just to kind of let the big bad guy know what happened. Yeah. And like, you know, I would be really surprised if he had a significant role in the next book. I hope he doesn't, because I'm like, I mean, like, I didn't hate the character or anything, but it's like, yeah, like what you said, there was, you know, it was very much like, oh, there's not much depth here. There's just this person who's going to kind of make sure character A gets to character B. Yeah. Or, you know, we have a little bit of this backstory that might be more relevant to the greater story that's, you know, in the book and the ones that are yet to come. So,
do you? Yeah. What are your opinions on Lucasfilm handling Thrawn outside of the books? Like, if
I was going to mention this, actually.
Well, to me, I sit here and I look at this and I go, why can't this be your new Star Wars adjacent trilogy? Why can't this be your Rian Johnson stuff? Or, I mean, I'm not saying Rian Johnson should adapt that. I want him to kind of do his own thing, you know? But like my concept is like, I'm surprised that they are building this world so heavily in these books, kind of like High Republic stuff. You know, it surprises me that they want to go into this world and really like build here, but yet they're scrambling for ideas elsewhere for movies and live action and stuff. I'm like, like I get it. I want a solo show just as much as anybody else. You know what I mean? And I would take the Kira show or the Maul show or the Memphis Nest show, anything like that. But it does kind of surprise me that like the Thrawn live action, like Game of Thrones like esque political,
there you go,
whatever big thing that's happening over here adjacent to the regular galaxy. Why is that not happening, you know?
Yeah, I agree. I wondered that a lot myself, and I also wondered too if this was like, you know, I don't mean to like give them you know, like try to be, you know, tinfoil hat person here too, but if they are potentially kind of, I know that there's, you know, rumors of like another Rebel show or something to do with Ezra, where you would assume that they're going to be in this part of the galaxy. If this is trilogy, it's not just serving to set that up, but it will, you know, coincidentally, you know, set that up. And one of the things I thought about too, because after I read this, I was like, I want some more Thrawn, you know? And so I went and rewatched some of the Rebels episodes, and like, I actually stopped kind of watching them because I was like, this character is so different. I mean, in some of the ways it's similar, but he's so different from the ones in the book, where I wonder if like this trilogy is going to be like what you're saying, where there's going to be kind of this downfall of Thrawn. Like he's going to be kind of a tragic character, him being sent away into the galaxy that we know of Star Wars. If that's like not, you know, if there's more to the story than we know, if it's kind of like a tragic thing for him, like he doesn't want to go and he's doing this. Which I think would be really interesting, because he seems really bitter and mean in Rebels. So the very first Thrawn book, he's sent over into this other galaxy, and he's learning with Eli the political mindset. He still doesn't get the politics yet. So we know that with this series of books, Chaos Rising, the second book and the third book, throughout this entire trilogy, he's never going to get the political aspect. And they've definitely driven that home multiple times in this book. He understands military. He gets it. He does not understand the politics. Even though he seems to think that they're one and the same, he still has issues with that political side. I have a feeling that as much as they mentioned it in this book, that is because there's going to be a big theme over this trilogy that is, he tries to get into politics,
and it messes him up. Just the same way as like if a politician who is really good at their job tried to lead a military of some sort, it's not going to work, and he's going to get screwed somehow. I think what's ultimately going to happen is they're leading into, hey, we're going to tell this story. He's a great military war hero. He did it all, but he went too far, got into the political climate, and then the political climate chewed him up, spit him out, and told him to go over there. And when he goes over there, he meets Eli, he meets the Emperor, he meets Moff Tarkin, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And he learns politics more so over there. And then who knows, like when we get the the Rebels story, because I don't care if there's an animated show coming or not. I'm not here to talk about the rumors. What I am here to talk about is there's no way that story is not going to get written at some point. Book, comic, animated series, live action, I don't care what it is. There's no way they just leave Rebels like that and go, Thrawn and Ezra, they went somewhere, we don't know, and then we just never get that story. That's just it. They're gonna eventually go, I think people like Rebels made us a lot of money, let's go ahead and finish that story. You know, that story's definitely coming. So I think it is very possible that now that Thrawn kind of understands the politic and the military, I don't know. It would be interesting to see what his story is with Ezra. I don't know why we're talking Rebels. I don't know how we got into that.
Well, I'm just saying that I think this sets the table for anything that comes beyond that. If that story, like you were talking, bigger implications. And I was also going to say too, when I watched, I just watching Rebels, those episodes just to see Thrawn there, just because I wanted a little bit more. And that's kind of the least exposure that I have to him, because I've only watched that series once. So I went back and watched those, and it seemed like such a starkly different character that I feel like, the Thrawn that we meet when he comes into the Empire, like what you're saying, something bad has happened to him. And like what you're saying, there's going to be something bad. Like, what you're saying is he's going outside his lane, and that's really going to come back to bite him. So, and I totally agree. I think that would be a very logical way of him kind of really falling out with the Chiss.
Because we're doing this video, and I probably should have done the research on here, and I'm trying to remember how the beginning of that Thrawn book starts, but I feel like I remember it kind of being very like Jar Jar Binks-ish, in the sense of like, why were you banished? And he's like, I was clumsy. And they're like, they banished you because you were clumsy? And he's like, yeah, I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
Like they do, it seems like he's alluding to, I didn't really choose to leave. There's kind of a bigger reason why I'm here now. I think when they were writing those books, the bigger reason was just they were trying to paint a picture of Thrawn just coming over here to test the Empire to see if they could be allies or not. But I think that this book's kind of gonna retroactively kind of shift that a little bit and be like, hey, that is gonna be part of his goal, but he also is gonna be banished for these other reasons or not. So I mean, I think that kind of is my version of where I think this story is going. I am excited for the second and third books. I think it's a little crazy sometimes that we're gonna get 6 Thrawn novels and we still don't have Lost Stars 2.
But that would be nice. And I twittered at them the other day or something, and they said that they're currently editing the second novel, so I would expect it, within the next year probably. Lost Stars 2. Not Lost Stars 2. Yes, no. We're announcing it here. No. I think the internet or Star Wars Twitter would explode when they announced Lost Stars 2. So, dude,
I mean, this is around the time that Celebration would have been, so maybe even before this video airs, or maybe soon after, we will get a little announcement from some sort of publishing thing that, these are the books that we're working on, but we will see. I'm excited for Thrawn. I like this book. Excited for the next ones. And I think that wraps up our discussion. That's pretty much all I got to say about this book.
Sounds good.
You guys can catch me on the Resistance broadcast twice a week, talking news and other things like that. If you're watching this video, you're probably aware of the channel, but make sure you subscribe, like this video, leave us comments. Let's talk about the book. This is kind of an open space for the book people. We hardly talk books on the Resistance broadcast. We'll talk news, we'll talk excerpts, things like that. But this is the book discussion, guys. If you like the books, leave comments. Let's get to know us. We want to get to know you. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at MyraTrunks. Kyle, where can people find you online?
You can find me on Twitter as well, Kyle D. Larson, and then I also write for write for Star Wars Newsnet, book reviews, comic reviews, and contribute to What the Force Show. So come on, check us out. So I'm around.
All right. Well, that is it for book discussions. Until next time, may the Force be with you.
Thanks for watching, everyone.